Today we're going to talk about the high cost of illegal aliens. They are very costly. I did a debate a few weeks ago with somebody who is on the other side of this issue, and she said that 90% of the people who come over our southern border are good people. Well, even if you take that figure as valid, what about the 10%? And there are 10% who are not good people. And the question is, what are we doing about it? The figures that I will give you are all authentic figures from the government, which likes to minimize this problem. But we have about 1 million coming over our border every year. And the government, Homeland Security, admits that in the last 5 months, 42,000 criminals have come over our southern border. And in the year 2005, the figure was 139,000 criminals. Now, these are mostly people who have been convicted in the United States, released, and then they go back over the border, and then they come back over. And when they apprehend some of the Mexicans coming over, they just simply put them back on the other side of the border, and it's so long, see you tomorrow, coming over the next day. So they come over repeatedly, and many thousands of them commit terrible crimes. In addition to the criminals, Homeland Security admits that last year, in 1 year, they caught 155,000 OTMs. These are people who are other than Mexicans. Now, they're coming from all over the world, and I can tell you the people who are coming in from the Middle East are not coming to pick strawberries in Florida. That's not why they're coming. And these are only figures of the people they caught. We don't have any figures on the ones they didn't catch, because we have only 11,000 border guards on our southern border. Now, they are treated differently from the Mexicans. They are given what we call the catch and release system. And what that means is they catch these OTMs, take them to some government office, fingerprint them, take their names and so forth, and then they release them on your own recognizance and say, come back in a month and we'll deal with you. Now, does anybody want to guess what happens to them within that month? The number of people who come back is just almost nil. They disappear into the population. CBS had a segment the other night in which they showed some of these OTMs, other than Mexicans, coming over, and they said they want to be caught because they know that once they get caught, they'll get this catch and release, and they're kind of home free to come in to our population. Now, if a Mexican day laborer can sneak over the border, so can an al-Qaeda terrorist. In October, Michael Chertoff, who's the head of Homeland Security, testified before a Senate committee, and he said, and I quote, "We will completely eliminate the catch and release process and return every single illegal entrant, no exceptions," close quote. 18,207 have come in since he said that. And now he's saying, we're going to try to do this maybe next year. Now, Homeland Security issued an alert in December, just a couple of months ago, that Mexican alien smugglers have hired contract killers to kill our border guards, including members of the terrible MS-13 gang. This is the gang that comes from El Salvador, and they're the most vicious people anybody has ever seen in this country. They're all tattooed with MS-13. They believe in mutilations and beheadings and terribly vicious crimes. We are now told that they have spread around in 33 states. There are 10,000 of them in this country. And there was a piece on television the other night that said that quite a number of them have gone to New Orleans. And these are smart guys. And they've gone there to work in construction work and rebuilding New Orleans. So by day, they're carpenters or plumbers or whatever. And by night, they're the killers. And they interviewed somebody on the Louisiana New Orleans police force. Of course, a lot of us think Louisiana has always been a state with a lot of problems. But this policeman said they have never seen anything like the viciousness of these MS-13 killers. Now, the next problem we have with the way they're coming over the southern border is drugs. Most of the illegal drugs in this country come over the southern border. And if we don't secure that border, we are absolutely giving up on the fight against illegal drugs. The Homeland Security now admits there have been 231 incursions over our border by Mexican military. Now, the Mexican military, which is completely corrupt, gets into the act because they are there to protect the drug smugglers. And so they've come over our border, we call this an invasion, to protect the people who are carrying the illegal drugs. Our people have seen military vehicles with 50 caliber machine guns mounted on them, escorting the drug smugglers over the border. And our people couldn't do anything about it because they're outgunned and outmanned. All they could do was to take pictures. Just a few weeks ago, our government seized a cache of military weapons in a town in Texas. And the only reason I know about this is because some of my Texas friends faxed it to me. I did find admission of this on the internet, but I did not find any other newspaper in the country that carried this. And they found this cache of weapons in one house that included 2 bombs, the makings of 33 more bombs, military-style hand grenades, assault rifles, machine guns, an enormous store of ammunition, bulletproof vests, and everything else. And this is war. This is the drug war that's going on our southern border. And are we going to give up, or are we going to fight and prevent this from coming in? You probably did read about the 24-foot tunnel. That did get some publicity. That was extraordinary, very sophisticated tunnel with electricity and air conditioning, and men can stand up in it and so forth. The third point about the border on the south is the smuggling of people. And this is an organized racket. You don't think somebody wakes up one morning in Brazil and says, I think I'll walk up through Central America and just make a run across the border. It doesn't work that way. This is an organized racket, and they say a very profitable one. The smugglers charge about $1,500 to bring Mexicans in, and then the price goes higher as the country is farther away. It's higher for the people in South America or in China, Asia, and we've even discovered somebody from the Middle East who paid $50,000 to be smuggled across the border. And again, those kind of people are not coming to pick your produce in Florida. In addition to smuggling them across, a lot of these crooks who are bringing them in these vans may hold them for ransom after they get here and demand an additional payment. This is where you get into some of the sex trafficking and the terrible treatment of the women who, of course, don't speak the language, don't know where they are, and are held by these criminals who are bringing them in these big vans. They say that a loaded 18-wheeler can be worth up to $200,000. That's with warm bodies crammed in the truck without cooling or without water, and it is a terrible racket. And the only time you hear about it is when somebody dies. Every now and then they park the van, they open it up, and they've got a couple of people who died from dehydration or heat, and then you hear about it. But they're coming over all the time. The next problem we have with what's going on the border is that life is unsafe down there. We have Eagles who have lived on the Arizona property for many years, and everybody has to be armed. They can't go out of their house without a gun and a cell phone. They can't go out at night. Just imagine living in your own home and having to take a gun when you go to the grocery store or take your kids to school. And their property has been ruined. The tamping of thousands of feet coming over their property every night means that the ground is tamped down almost like concrete. So they can't grow anything. So they can't ranch the property, and they can't sell it. And that's the way it is. I urge you to read Congressman J.D. Hayworth's new book, Whatever It Takes, which describes very clearly what's going on and what it's like to live in those areas of southern Arizona. The next problem we have is the accidents. Now, I don't know why they're such terrible drivers, but I have picked up off the internet hundreds of stories, and these are items that make the national news, but never make the local news, but never make the national news. And there are just hundreds of these cases of the illegal aliens driving 90 to 100 miles an hour the wrong way on the highway without headlights. And this has happened again and again and again. Just a few weeks ago, there was a college girl in Georgia who was killed by one of these cars going the wrong way at great speed and without headlights. And he, in particular, had been caught and returned to Mexico 17 times before this happened. Now, what's the solution for all this? First of all, I think we need a fence on the border. We need a fence. And a fence is a very effective thing for keeping people out. They put up a fence in San Diego, and it's done a good job. That's why most of them are now coming in Arizona. They say it's costly. The estimate cost is $2.5 billion. That is 4% of the costs that we are paying right now for all the things we are doing for the illegal aliens after they get here. And, we have a fence around the White House. Some of you may have been with me in the days when I picketed Rosalind Carter and then picketed Betty Ford when they were lobbying for the Equal Rights Amendment. Well, you can't get near the White House anymore because they've got a fence and they've got people patrolling it. And about once every 2 years, some guy tries to get over the fence, but he doesn't get very far. A fence is very effective, and we need it. And we need more manpower on the border. We've only got 11,000 Border Patrol down there, which for this enormous border, which is a tiny fraction of, say, the number of New York policemen. And we need detention beds so that we can hold these people and not let them loose and say, see you in a month when you come back and report. The costs are tremendous. And then you have the costs of the people we do catch and convict and put in prison. 1/4 of the people in federal prisons today are illegal aliens. This is a cost that you all are paying as federal taxpayers. Now let's talk about some of the other costs. The cost of our medical care and health care in this country is tremendous because of this problem of the illegal aliens coming in. The federal law requires hospital emergency rooms to treat anybody who shows up. So these people don't have any health insurance, and they show up, and they have to be treated. And the many California hospitals have closed, and dozens of hospitals have closed their emergency room. Now, they start out, they load the extra costs on the taxpayers, the local taxpayers, or they load it on increasing the bills of the people who do pay for their health care costs, and then ultimately they find they have to close it. And in addition to the illegal aliens in this country who are treated that way, our hospitals in our country have basically become trauma centers for the whole stretch along the northern part of Mexico, because they will bring in people and say this is an emergency coming across the border, heavy lights and so forth. And the big health problems that happen in Mexico that has nothing to do with people in here then come across the border and are treated in our own hospitals. Another aspect of the health care is the racket, and it's another racket of bringing in 8 and 9 month pregnant women to have their babies in this country. And it's an organized racket from all over the world. Because we have made the mistake of giving birthright citizenship to anybody who's born in this country. These babies are then eligible to all of our welfare benefits, and they become what is called anchor babies, because that means once the citizenship is given to the baby can bring in all his extended relatives. And it's now running at 380,000 of these babies a year who are born to illegal aliens in our country. This is 10% of all the births in our country. And there are people who will tell you this is required by the Constitution. I don't accept that view. I feel this could be changed by congressional law. Why aren't they doing it? That is the solution to that problem. The next problem, and this also relates to health care, is the problem of disease. They are bringing in all kinds of diseases that we don't have in this country or that we thought we cured decades ago. When you come in as a legal immigrant, you have to pass a health test. You're supposed to be healthy. You don't think anybody's given a health test to these people sneaking over the border. No way. And so we find that we have an enormous rise in tuberculosis and malaria, which are diseases that we thought we got rid of years ago. There are widespread diseases in Central and South America in terms of intestinal parasites and Chagas, which are coming in large numbers. We found quite a few cases of leprosy coming in. The hepatitis B seems to be coming from the Asians when they come in, and the West Nile virus from Africa. But all these diseases are coming in, and again, this is a load on our health care cost. The New York Times had a story just a few weeks ago about the Filipino nurse at a New York City hospital who had tuberculosis. And she exposed 1,500 people and infected 4 infants because they had this woman in the maternity care floor, which is just absolutely outrageous. They love to bring in the nurses from the Philippines, and tuberculosis is widespread there. Now the costs of the schools. And this is the aspect of it that we can blame on the judges. As I told you, I think the judges are the cause of most problems. And it was a decision by William Brennan in 1982, Plyer v. Doe, in which he said that we have the responsibility to take illegal aliens into our public schools. And they overturned a Texas law which said only citizens were going to be in the public schools. And there is nothing in the Constitution that says we have to provide schooling for illegal aliens. This is just another case where the supremacist judge made it up. They think we have a living and evolving Constitution that they can rewrite, and that's what he said. Now, it costs $7,000 to $10,000 a year to educate anybody in the public schools, plus breakfast and lunch if you're low income level. And this was a tremendous invitation to attract more illegal aliens coming in, and then they can put their children in schools here. Another aspect of the schooling is the way they're trying to give the illegal aliens in-state college tuition. Now, you are probably familiar that when you go to college, to a state university, there's one rate for the citizens of the state because the citizens of the state are paying taxes to support this state university, and it's a higher price if you come from another state. For example, one of my children got his doctorate at the University of California at Berkeley, fortunately years ago, but if it were today, that would be a differential of $20,000 a year. Now, there are 7 states that give the in-state college tuition to the illegal aliens. And I believe this is even in violation of federal law, which says you're not supposed to do it, but those 7 states don't pay attention to that. They go ahead and do it anyway, and there are controversies and efforts in many other states to give the same type of favored treatment to the illegal aliens, which is a preferential tax treatment. Now we have the matter of what they're doing to jobs in this country. And this is another very large area. The estimates of how many illegal aliens are in this country range between 12 million and 20 million. Bear Stearns Investment House has estimated 20 million in this country. And I think basically you can consider that there are 3 types of jobs that they take. One is they go into the underground economy. Now, the underground economy means paying cash, so then the employer doesn't pay any benefits, any workers' comp, unemployment insurance, any other benefits. They pay cash, and so they can pay less. And this is a system that is very unfair to the honest businessman who's trying to comply with the laws because he can't make bids that will match the bids that are made by the people who are employing illegal aliens. Bear Stearns has estimated that if the proper taxes were collected from people in the underground economy, it would be $400 billion, which is enough to wipe out our federal deficit. We are talking about big money. Now, all of the people in the underground economy, of course, are not illegal aliens, but a lot of them are. The Los Angeles Times thinks that most of the people in Los Angeles County are the illegal aliens. Then you have these people who come in and they are working for employers who are paying the taxes and paying a fairly low wage, but they've come in with fake documents. And, of course, the business of getting fake documents is a tremendous industry. A lot of people like to talk about these illegal aliens as undocumented immigrants. They are not undocumented. They've got pockets full of documents, but they're fraudulent. And they then will work under a fake Social Security number, and the employer doesn't check up on it, so the employer is paying the proper taxes, but it's not valid, but at any rate, the employer thinks he is complying with the law. Now, the thing is that most of these people are in the low-paid, a low-income category. So that means they come in for what is called the Earned Income Tax Credit. Now, this is a form of welfare that you don't hear much about, but people below a certain income get a cash refund or a bonus from the federal government that's called the Earned Income Tax Credit. So the employer gets the benefit of the low wage, but the taxpayers are picking up the bill. These are the people that the administration is trying to give a benefit that is hiding under the code name totalization. And totalization means putting all these people in the Social Security system, which I believe would break the system just as baby boomers are getting ready to retire. And I think they've already had what they're entitled to through the Earned Income Tax Credit and the other forms of subsidized housing and other benefits that they get. The third way that they come in is through the H-1B visas. And most of these are legal, at least they start out being legal, even if they end up being illegal. The H-1B visas are a complete racket. This is a law that says that industries can bring in foreigners when there is a labor shortage in this country. Some professor at the University of California has made a tremendous investigation of this. And in the areas of engineering and computer science, which is the areas where most of the H-1B visas go, there never was any labor shortage. And there certainly is none today. Since the dot-com bust, we probably have up to 200,000 unemployed American engineers and computer techs in this country, unemployed or underemployed. And the idea that there's some labor shortage is ridiculous. Now, Bill Gates goes around the country saying there are not enough people taking math and science in college and more ought to take math and science. But he doesn't hire Americans. You look at the records of who he's hiring. He is hiring Indians, that is from East India, or the Chinese, or from Pakistan, whom they can hire at much lower than wage than what Americans expect. And when I go around to the college campuses, the students are now being told, don't take computers. There are no jobs out there. And this is because they've been given away through the H-1B visas. Now, they're supposed to be only for a term of 3 years and then another 3 years, but nobody checks up on whether they leave when their time is up. And nobody has a clue as to how many of these H-1B visas are in this country. If they go to work for colleges or universities, they are not even in the count. And Congress keeps adding, under pressure from companies like Microsoft and others, to keep increasing the number of H-1B visas that they will allow. So the solution for a lot of these things is, first of all, to secure the borders and stop the illegals coming in, to have a good system for tracking the visas. And of course, many of the illegal aliens in this country came into this country legally and then overstayed their visas. You know, all of the people in the 9/11 tragedy all came into this country legally, and then they overstayed their visas. So that is another area, and there's no reason why our government, if they can track mad cow disease, I don't know why they can't track these illegal aliens who overstay their visas and do that. And then the solution for the matter of jobs is to make use of the Social Security number. Now, you all know when you apply for a job, you have to give your Social Security number. We've been doing this for years. Everybody has to do it. And there's a system all in place. The technology is there for the employer to call up the government and say, this is Joe Blow with such and such a number. Is it a good number? Does he really exist? But only about 1 or 2% of employers are doing this. It is voluntary. It is not mandatory. And all they need to do is make that mandatory, and it would go a long way over a period of several years to solving this problem. Now we find that Congress is making some noises about bringing in border security along our southern border, but it's all very slow. It's not moving along. They really don't want to do it. And I think Congressman Charlie Norwood kind of explained what this is doing to us. With a million illegal aliens coming in every year, over the next 4 years, under the present way that things are being done, we will take in 4 million, which is equivalent to admitting the 51st state. And a 51st state that is peopled entirely by low-income, undereducated illegals. And that's what is happening to this country today. It's admitting a 51st state of these people. Now, what you find in Washington is you hear a lot of talk about having a guest worker program. That is a euphemism for amnesty. Amnesty is forgiving the offense of the past and not putting any penalty on it. And they want to, they've approached it, there are different plans. Ted Kennedy has a plan, John McCain has a plan, we think George Bush will have a plan, although we don't know the details. Some of them are for making them citizens, and some of them are for not making them citizens. And, but certainly some of them are for inviting what they call any willing workers. Do you know how many willing workers who would love to come to the United States and work for $2 an hour there are in the world? There are about 5 billion people in the world who are poorer than the people in Mexico. And they'd be glad to come here and work for $2 an hour. The idea of inviting any willing worker is, I think, unacceptable. Now, one of the problems with this is been there, done that. We had an amnesty in 1986. And we were told this was a one-time deal, that this would solve all the problems. And the result is it quadrupled the number of illegal aliens we have in this country. And it doesn't work. No guest worker program has ever worked in the history of the world. Just look at what's happened in Europe, in France, and in Germany. Those people who went down on that boat over there were guest workers. You got a country like Saudi Arabia who've got all that oil money and they think they're too good to do any useful work, so they import the workers from poor countries to do the useful work, and a lot of them went down on that boat. But I think the whole system is immoral. We don't want to build a subordinate underclass in this country. America is a wonderful land that invited people from all over the world to come here. And we want people to come who want to be 100% Americans, who will learn our language, obey our Constitution and our laws, and be good Americans. We don't want an underclass or a peasant class in this society, which is absolutely what any guest worker program is. Most of them say they'll invite them in for a few years to do menial work, and then they'll send them home. It doesn't happen. They don't go home. So it's a very bad idea. Now, Senator Cornyn of Texas, I heard him speak on this subject recently, and he is for a guest worker program. And he said, like it or not, we are married to Mexico, and we can't get a divorce. Now, I think you Texans will remember that Texas once was married to Mexico, and they didn't like it, and they fought a war of independence and did get their divorce. And there simply are people who want to eliminate the borders between the United States and Canada and Mexico. If you've been reading the Phyllis Schlafly report, you know that this is promoted by very powerful and influential people in this country. And just as a sidelight, the gays are already bragging that Canada's big export to this country will be same-sex marriage, because Canada legalizes same-sex marriage, and we recognize marriages performed in other countries. So that's one of the benefits we would have from an open border with Canada. So I think Theodore Roosevelt gave us a good statement on this subject of building an underclass. He said, "We cannot afford to use hundreds of thousands of immigrants merely as industrial assets while they remain social outcasts and menaces any more than 50 years earlier we could afford to keep the black man merely as an industrial asset and not as a human being." And I think the arguments used for the guest worker are basically the arguments that were used for slavery. This is good for our economy. We need people to do this work. We don't want to do it. So import these people and keep them in a subservient class. And that's not the kind of America we want. We want an America where people come here and they start out at entry-level jobs and they rise into the middle class and they become 100% Americans. So to sum up, the solutions that I propose are to secure the borders by building a fence, greatly increasing the number of our border guards, at least to 50,000, and increasing the number of detention beds to take care of these other than Mexicans, but until we can get some country to take them back. You know, they say these countries won't take them back, but we're giving foreign aid to all these other countries. Just tell them you cut off your foreign aid unless you take these people back. Secondly, we need to track the people who come in on visas who have an expiration date. Third, we need to stop this racket of birthright citizenship, where they bring in people to have their babies in this country. Fourth, stop the racket of H-1B visas. Fifth, we should make the use of a Social Security number when somebody goes for a job, the checking that out, mandatory. And finally, we should reject the guest worker system, whatever it is called. So that's a hot issue. It is a hot issue all over the country. Now, you all know your geography, and you know that Kansas, Iowa, Georgia, and North Carolina are not on the border. It's the hottest issue in those states. Georgia is a transfer point for the illegal drugs coming in, and they've made contact with a lot of these other states. And I think the American people, the Congress, and the Republican Party ought to deal with this issue, level with the American people, and make sure that the people who come to this country come legally, respect our laws, respect our Constitution, and get ready to assimilate and become 100% Americans. Thank you.